$500,000 in bribes, a federal prison sentence, and 7 years completely frozen out of Hollywood. That was the price Lorie Laughlin paid. Hallmark fired her. The world moved on. And then, against every single expectation, they called her back.
So you're back for season 14?
14.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
I would love to know how you found out you were coming back and what was your reaction?
Well, I have to say, Aaron, for a long time, has been putting a bug in everyone's ear about bringing me back, talking to the powers that be at Hallmark. And then Brad Cravoy, my good friend Brad Cravoy, has been a huge supporter and also kind of talking and working behind the scenes. And then the lovely, beautiful, wonderful, I love her so much, Michelle Vickery came back. And that was really it. And of course, Mike Perry and Darren Abbott, and them just being supportive and just welcoming me with open arms has been so good for my soul, and I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah? What excites you the most about getting into the whole
working with these clowns?
Listen, I hope we'll see Abigail back in the cafe, doing as she does. But I think a big question on a lot of Hardy's minds is,
Henry.
Is she going to resume her romance with Gowan?
Well, they never really had a romance, but they definitely sort of dance around.
It was getting close.
Do you want to hear something?
Was getting
do you
close.
want to hear something funny about that?
In Deidre's mind, there was a romance.
Well, yes, in Deidre's mind. No, and I think the Hardys too are always asking about. But that all came about. It was so. Martin and I were working. I don't even know how many seasons ago. We had scenes, and it was all conflict. We didn't like each other, and we started talking, and I said to him, "Hey, do you want to
Now the internet is absolutely losing it. She didn't just lose a role, she lost her reputation, her freedom, and a character that millions of people genuinely loved. For 7 years, the door to Hope Valley stayed shut, locked, and not even the most devoted fans seriously believed it would ever open again. But here we are, because Lorie Laughlin is officially returning to When Calls the Heart for season 14, and the reaction from both sides of the fan base is unlike anything this quiet little Hallmark drama has ever seen before. Going back to where this all started matters, because you cannot understand the weight of what's happening right now without understanding how far this woman fell and how long the road back has actually been. For nearly 6 full seasons, Lorie Laughlin was the emotional backbone of When Calls the Heart. Her character, Abigail Stanton, wasn't just a supporting player, she was the soul of Hope Valley. Before Elizabeth Thatcher had fully found her footing in the town, before the love stories and the mysteries and the community milestones, Abigail was already there, already woven into the fabric of the town, already the person everyone turned to when things fell apart. Season 2 broke her wide open. A catastrophic mining disaster tore through Hope Valley and took everything from Abigail in a single devastating moment. Her husband was gone. Her only son was gone. Dozens of the town's men, fathers, brothers, neighbors, gone. That kind of loss doesn't just change a character, it defines her. What made Abigail so extraordinary, what made Lorie Laughlin's performance so quietly powerful, was that Abigail didn't crumble. She grieved, deeply, honestly, the way real grief actually looks. Then she stood back up. She opened a cafe. She became the mayor of Hope Valley. She offered a steady, compassionate presence to nearly everyone around her, even while still carrying her own pain. Fans didn't just like Abigail Stanton, they needed her, because she represented the idea that you can survive the worst thing imaginable and still choose to show up for the people who depend on you. That kind of character leaves a permanent mark. Then, in 2019, everything collapsed. Lorie Laughlin and her husband, fashion designer Massimo Giannulli, were swept up in one of the most high-profile scandals in recent Hollywood history, the college admissions bribery case that sent shockwaves across the country. Federal prosecutors accused the couple of paying $500,000 in bribes to get their daughters admitted to the University of Southern California as crew recruits, despite the fact that neither daughter had ever rowed competitively in her life. The fallout was swift, brutal, and very public. Hallmark Channel cut ties with Laughlin almost immediately, and Abigail Stanton was written out of When Calls the Heart halfway through season 6, not with a goodbye, not with a proper send-off, but with a rushed explanation that she had left Hope Valley to care for her ailing mother. No closure, no final scene, just an absence where Abigail used to be. Laughlin later pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud and served a 2-month prison sentence at a federal facility in Dublin, California. For a long time after that, her name and Hallmark Channel existed in completely separate worlds. Coming back seemed not just unlikely, it seemed genuinely impossible. Before I keep going, drop a comment right now. Are you happy Abigail is coming back? Or do you think Hallmark made a mistake? I genuinely want to know what side you're on. Revelations from behind the scenes make this comeback even more meaningful than the headline suggests. In a recent sit-down interview with Entertainment Tonight, Lorie Laughlin herself opened up about exactly how the return came together, and what she revealed is both touching and surprising. Her co-star Erin Krakow, the woman who plays Elizabeth Thatcher at the very center of the show, had been quietly putting in a word for her with the powers that be at Hallmark for a long time. Not just once, consistently, repeatedly. Erin was advocating for Lorie's return even when it was far from certain that anyone would listen. Producer Brad Cravoy had also been working behind the scenes, supporting her through the entire process. When Hallmark Media's head of programming, Michelle Vickery, came on board, things finally started to shift. Laughlin described the team at Hallmark, Mike Perry, Darren Abbott, welcoming her back with open arms. Her words in that interview weren't a rehearsed PR line. They were the words of a woman who spent 7 years wondering whether this world would ever let her back in, and who finally had her answer. Hallmark has officially confirmed that When Calls the Heart is renewed for season 14, with production set to begin in Vancouver and a 2027 premiere as the current target. 6 episodes, that is Laughlin's commitment, marking her first appearance in the main series in 7 full years. Michelle Vickery has publicly stated that Abigail has always held a special place in fans' hearts, and that the themes she carries, hope, positivity, genuine human connection, are inseparable from the identity of When Calls the Heart itself. 6 episodes is not a background cameo. It's not a brief walk-on designed to generate headlines and vanish. It's a real, substantive arc for a character whose story was cut short before it was finished. Immediately, the internet split straight down the middle. Overjoyed fans flooded social media with comments like, "Abigail is the heart of Hope Valley," and "The show hasn't been the same without her." One viewer captured it perfectly. The entire theme of When Calls the Heart is redemption and new beginnings, and bringing Abigail back is the show walking its own talk in real life. These are the viewers who never stopped missing Abigail, who felt the hole her absence carved out, and who have been quietly waiting, maybe without even admitting it to themselves, for precisely this moment. Rage, though, is equally loud on the other side. Comments flooding in saying, "She should never be allowed back, what a joke!" Viewers announcing they'll skip every episode she appears in. One commenter wrote that taking a plea deal at the last minute is not the same as truly reckoning with what you did, and that they cannot separate the actress from the character anymore. Another simply wrote, "Makes millions and still a thief, so sad." The anger is raw, and it hasn't faded the way Hallmark clearly hoped it might. Deliberately and without hesitation, Hallmark made a choice that will delight one half of its audience and alienate the other, and they made it anyway. Renewing season 14 before season 13 even premiered wasn't a reactive decision. It was a confident statement from a network that believes this story still has somewhere meaningful left to go. Underneath all of this, the return didn't come out of nowhere. A stepping stone existed. A quiet, carefully placed moment where Abigail Stanton slipped back into this universe before most people even realized it was happening. Lorie Laughlin had already re-entered the When Calls the Heart world through the spin-off series When Hope Calls, which marked her first acting role after prison. She appeared in 2 episodes of its second season. Abigail spent Christmas in Brookfield with her adopted son Cody, and a dream sequence brought her face-to-face with the ghost of Jack Thornton, the beloved character whose death had shattered Hope Valley and changed Elizabeth forever. Jack asked Abigail in that dream to carry a message back to Elizabeth. Brief, quiet, but loaded with emotional weight, because it reminded every single viewer just how deeply Abigail is connected to the core history of this show, even after years away. The spin-off also resolved an important plot thread. It revealed that Abigail's mother had made a full recovery, which dissolved the original reason given for her departure back in season 6. The door that had been left technically open but practically sealed, it is now swinging wide. Looking back now, When Hope Calls feels less like a spin-off appearance and more like a carefully designed runway. The show gently reminding the audience of who Abigail is and why her story still has chapters left to be written before bringing her fully home. Among the biggest questions fans are already asking, what happens between Abigail and Henry Gowan? In her Entertainment Tonight interview, Laughlin laughed when the subject came up. She and Martin Cummins, the actor who plays Gowan, had a real conversation on set years ago about making their characters' dynamic more charged. Scene after scene of conflict, she told him she wanted to push it further. Whether season 14 actually delivers that romance, she wasn't saying. But she didn't close the door either. The possibility is on the table, and that alone tells you how much story this character still has left. Nobody is talking yet about the most compelling question of all. With Abigail walking back into Hope Valley in the middle of one of the most gripping storylines the show has ever constructed, a destroyed town, a fire with no explanation, and two young boys sitting on a secret that could change everything. What role does she actually play? Because Abigail Stanton was never simply a warm presence. She was the woman who made people face the truth, who held the community together in its darkest hours. And Hope Valley right now is having its darkest hour in years. Ruins don't lie. Standing where Benson Hills used to be, a full community reduced to ash, nobody in Hope Valley has been able to feel anything close to peace, because a fire that size, in a location that specific, with no lightning and no trains anywhere near that ridge, is not an accident waiting to be explained, it is a secret waiting to be uncovered. In a town built on honesty and the kind of trust that takes years to earn and seconds to destroy, the truth about how that fire started is going to land harder than the flames themselves ever did. Season 13's second episode, titled Up in Smoke, didn't ease into anything. It dropped Hope Valley directly into chaos. Smoke appeared on the horizon fast, the town scrambled, people grabbed what they could, and evacuation started to feel not just possible, but inevitable. For a terrifying stretch of time, it looked like Hope Valley itself might be reduced to nothing. A shift in the wind saved the town, but it didn't save everything. Benson Hills was completely wiped out. Goldie National Park, gone. The beautiful new playhouse that Rosemary had poured her heart into, gone. Once the smoke cleared and the relief settled in that no lives had been lost, one question took over the whole town. How did this start? Mayor Lee Coulter threw himself into finding answers, and his suspicions landed almost immediately on AJ McGinty, a man who had been loudly, aggressively, and sometimes threateningly opposed to the creation of Goldie National Park from the very beginning. Stripped of grazing land he had relied on for years, AJ had made his feelings absolutely clear, and at one point earlier in the season, those feelings had crossed a line that sounded unmistakably like a warning. Lee laid out the facts plainly. No lightning strikes, no trains near the ridge, nothing that held up as a natural explanation under any real scrutiny. In his eyes, the timing wasn't a coincidence, it was a motive playing out exactly as he feared. Lee vowed he would not rest until justice was served. Who do you think started the fire? AJ McGinty, the electric company, or Cooper and Toby? Tell me in the comments, I'm reading every single one. Pulling the obvious thread until everything unravels is exactly what When Calls the Heart has always done best. The more you look at AJ McGinty as the villain of this story, the more you start to wonder if that is precisely what the show wants you to think. Motive? Clear. History of conflict? Documented. Bill Avery himself pointed out that AJ had a long habit of stirring up trouble and blocking others from using land for his own benefit. On paper, he is the perfect suspect, which is precisely why he might not be the answer at all. Comfortable conclusions have never been this show's style. The rug pull is part of its DNA. Cooper Canfield and Toby complicate everything. While the adults scrambled to contain the fire and point fingers at AJ, something quieter and far more unsettling was unfolding with two boys who should have been nowhere near suspicion. Viewers watched Cooper and Toby head out on a hike with Opal and Allie to check trail markers at Goldie National Park. Cooper had packed stew and cornbread, a small, seemingly throwaway detail, dropped the way shows only drop details casually when they want you to find them again later. The group split into pairs, covered different trails, and had to be rescued when the fire erupted around them. Everyone made it out alive, but when Cooper embraced his mother Minnie in the aftermath, His face told a story his mouth refused to say out loud. Not relieved, not simply frightened the way any child would be after nearly getting caught in a wildfire. Guilty. The specific, suffocating weight of a child who believes he has done something that cannot be undone. Preview footage shown afterward caught Elizabeth watching both boys carefully, noting how withdrawn they had become. Not the quiet that follows shock, the quiet that follows a secret. Fan theories have been multiplying ever since, and the most compelling one is heartbreakingly simple. The boys lit a small campfire to heat their food. It got away from them, and by the time they realized what was happening, it was already far beyond their control. If that is true, their silence makes complete sense. They are not hiding malice. They are hiding terror. Two children carrying the weight of an entire destroyed town on their shoulders, with no idea how to put it down. Deeper layers make this even more complicated, though. Entirely possible that Cooper and Toby believe they caused the fire when something else, or someone else, was actually responsible all along. That is the quiet genius of how this storyline has been constructed. A boy who looks guilty, a man with an undeniable motive, an electric company that recently installed Hope Valley's very first stoplight, a detail the show has not yet explained. A grieving town desperate for any answer that makes destruction feel like it had a reason rather than just a cause. Loss does that to people. It makes them reach for meaning even when the truth is nowhere in sight. Abigail Stanton sitting at the center of this mystery is not coincidence, and here is why. She is not simply a warm face returning to give longtime viewers a nostalgic reunion. She lived through the mining disaster that took her husband, her son, and dozens of the town's men. She knows what a community looks like when it is holding itself together with nothing but grief and the desperate need for someone to blame. She has stood where the mothers of Benson Hills are standing right now. If there is anyone in Hope Valley who would sit quietly with Cooper Canfield, look past the guilt written across his face, and ask the question that actually unlocks the truth, it is Abigail Stanton. Rethinking her return through that lens changes its entire shape. What if these 6 episodes aren't primarily about nostalgia or reunion, or even the romance with Henry Gowan? What if Abigail has been written back into this season specifically because the fire mystery needs her? Because the writers understood that the only person this community would trust with a secret this heavy is the woman who held Hope Valley together through its worst loss. That is not a cameo. That is not coffee and ketchups in a cafe that no longer belongs to her. That is Abigail Stanton doing exactly what she has always done, arriving in the moment the town is closest to falling apart. Henry Gowan demands attention here as well. No storyline from the pre-scandal era of When Calls the Heart has stayed more stubbornly alive in the fan community than the slow-building, never-quite-named almost relationship between Abigail and Henry. Adversaries first, Gowan cold, morally compromised, a man who put profit over people and found ways to justify it to himself for years. Abigail the opposite of everything he stood for. But somewhere in the friction, something shifted. Scenes between them started carrying a different charge, like two people who couldn't quite admit to themselves what they were becoming to each other. Laughlin confirmed in her Entertainment Tonight interview that she and Martin Cummins had an actual on-set conversation years ago about pushing that dynamic further. All that conflict, she told him, deserved to become something more. Whether season 14 actually delivers that romance, she wasn't giving away, but she didn't close the door either. Transformation is what makes the Gowan angle genuinely interesting now. The Henry Gowan that Abigail left behind was a work in progress, carrying guilt, reaching toward redemption, becoming something closer to a man Hope Valley could trust. If she walks back in and finds a Henry who has grown in her absence, partly because of what she saw in him when nobody else could, what does that do to a connection that was already simmering? What does Abigail do with a man who chose to become better while she was gone? Refusing to forgive is a real position, and the haters holding it deserve to be heard seriously rather than dismissed. The comments pouring in from viewers who won't watch season 14 aren't coming from nowhere. These are people who felt genuinely betrayed, not just by Lorie Laughlin the actress, but by the idea that a woman who paid to cheat a system that disadvantaged real families, families who played by the rules and still couldn't give their children the same doors, is now being welcomed back into a show built entirely on the values of integrity, community, and doing right by others. One commenter put it plainly, A plea deal at the last minute is not the same as truly reckoning with what you did. That lands. It is a fair point. Whether Lorie Laughlin has done the internal work, not legally, not professionally, but genuinely as a person, is not a question a Hallmark press release can answer. Betting on love for Abigail Stanton running deeper than anger at Lorie Laughlin is exactly what Hallmark is doing, very deliberately. They are betting 7 years is long enough, that 6 episodes is the right amount of runway to remind the audience why they loved this character before asking them to commit to more. Essentially, they are wagering on the same idea the show has always been built around: second chances. The belief that people are not only the worst thing they ever did. If viewers who swore they would never watch find themselves pulled back in by the first scene where Abigail walks down a familiar street and someone who missed her says her name, then Hallmark will have pulled off something remarkable. Staying away is still the outcome if the haters turn out to be right. If the damage is too deep, if the audience that walked refuses to return, then season 14 becomes something else entirely. A risk that didn't pay off. A chapter that should have stayed closed. One thing cannot be erased, though. Not by the haters, not by 7 years of silence. Abigail Stanton was there first. She held Hope Valley together before most of the current cast arrived. She stood in the rubble of her own life and chose to rebuild, not for herself, but for everyone around her. Hope Valley is standing in rubble again right now. A destroyed town, a fire without an explanation, 2 frightened boys with a secret, a community searching for something steady to hold on to. So does Abigail Stanton walk back into the wreckage of Benson Hills and give Hope Valley what it's desperately searching for? Or does her return crack open something that this fragile, grieving town is nowhere near ready to face? Coming home after 7 years is not a triumphant entrance. It is complicated. Abigail Stanton is not returning to the same Hope Valley she left, and she is not the same woman who left it. Quieter now, perhaps, carrying things she didn't carry before. Walking back into streets that have kept moving without her, into relationships that have reshaped themselves in her absence, into a community that is going to have to decide, just like the audience watching at home, whether it has room for a woman who disappeared without a proper goodbye. Strip away the fire mystery, the fan debate, and the question of Henry Gowan, and what remains is the true emotional core of what Season 14 is about. Coming home after you have been gone too long. After things have changed that cannot be unchanged. After people filled the space you left, not because they forgot you, but because life demanded it of them. Abigail left Hope Valley as its mayor, as the woman who ran the cafe, as the quiet center of gravity for an entire community. Returning to a town where the cafe has moved on, where someone else holds the responsibilities she used to carry, where the newest generation of Hope Valley residents barely knows her name, that gap between who she was and who she will need to become is exactly where the most interesting storytelling lives. If Abigail comes back, do you want her to reopen the cafe, step into a completely new role, or finally get that romance with Henry Gowan? Let me know below. Knowing the weight of this moment and carrying it openly is something Laughlin made clear in her Entertainment Tonight interview. She spoke about how much it has meant to her soul to be welcomed back by the cast and the network, the relief underneath every word she said unmistakable. Erin Krakow went to bat for her not because it was easy or uncomplicated, but because she believed Abigail's story was unfinished. Brad Cravoy, Michelle Vickery, Mike Perry, Darren Abbott, all of them made Laughlin feel genuinely wanted rather than merely strategically useful. Underneath that gratitude was something she couldn't quite hide. The relief that only comes after a very long time of not knowing whether a door you love has been permanently closed. 6 episodes is what she has been given. 6 episodes to remind a divided fan base why Abigail Stanton mattered, why her absence left a wound that seasons of great television never fully healed, and why her story deserves to be finished properly, rather than left in the quiet, unsatisfying place where Season 6 abandoned it. Not a full season, but enough to change everything if the writing gives Abigail the space to do what she has always done best: showing up, staying steady, speaking the truth even when the truth is the hardest thing in the room. Nowhere near going away, that is where the haters are. They were vocal before the announcement and they are louder now. Viewers who built real loyalty to this show are genuinely wrestling with whether they can separate the character from the actress, and for some of them the honest answer is no. That is not pettiness. That is a value system operating exactly as designed. When Calls the Heart of all shows built its entire identity on the idea that values mean something, so the irony of the haters' position is real, but so is their pain. Hallmark is asking its most morally invested audience to extend the same grace the show has always preached. Not everyone is ready. Maybe not everyone ever will be. History does tell us something, though, about moments like this one. When a beloved character returns after a long absence, when the writing is honest, the performance grounded, and the story gives the return actual weight rather than just the warmth of nostalgia, audiences tend to feel it. They tend to remember, viscerally and without warning, why they cared in the first place. Abigail walking back into an actively broken Hope Valley, into an unsolved mystery, into a community fracturing under the pressure of not knowing the truth. This is not a soft or comfortable return. This is Abigail being needed. Being needed is exactly where she has always been most alive. Vancouver production begins on the path to a 2027 premiere, and between now and then, the questions will keep building. Does Abigail step back into the cafe, or does she carve out an entirely new place in the town? Does Henry Gowan finally become the man she always seemed to believe he could be, and does she stay long enough to actually see it happen? Do Cooper and Toby find in Abigail the one person safe enough to finally tell the truth to? When the fire's origin is finally revealed and Hope Valley has to face what that truth costs, is Abigail standing there for the aftermath? Or does she disappear again before the dust settles? Reckoning is the only word that fits what Season 14 is building toward. For Abigail, for Hope Valley, and for every viewer sitting in front of their screen in 2027 deciding whether they believe in second chances. Not as a theme, not as a storyline device, as something real that applies to real people who have genuinely done wrong. Never simply a character on a Hallmark show. That is the truth about Abigail Stanton that her absence made impossible to ignore. She was the reason a lot of people kept watching when the storylines got difficult, kept coming back when the seasons felt uneven, kept believing that Hope Valley was worth caring about. Her absence left something that seasons of great television never quite filled. Coming home now, into a town in crisis, into a mystery nobody has solved, into a fan base split right down the middle between people who cannot wait and people who say they will never forgive. That homecoming carries more weight than any storyline this show has attempted in years. Sitting with that question is worth your time. Whether you believe in second chances not as a story device but as a real, costly human thing, that is exactly what When Calls the Heart is asking of its audience right now. Every new detail as it comes, I'll be right here breaking it down. If this gave you something to think about, you already know what to do. See you in the next one.